This is my contributed presentation to the Geosynthetics Committee, AKG 80 in TRB 2025. The title is Laboratory Analysis of Asphalt Grid Reinforcement Effects. As background, this is a continued project that was originally funded by S&P, Simpson Strong Tie Company, and the Innovationsfond in Denmark, the chief scientist, under an industrial PhD project which was carried out by Julius Nielsen. There are two articles that came out from this project that are linked with this presentation. The first is mechanistic modeling of grid reinforced milled and overlaid asphalt pavements, and the second is full-scale validation of a mechanistic model for asphalt grid reinforcement. So as a background, if you have asphalt concrete characterized as a linear viscoelastic material with a relaxation function E of t, then the plot of E of t is shown here schematically. And if you have a grid reinforcement splitting the asphalt mix or asphalt concrete into two parts, there is a zone that is influenced by the grid. This zone has a thickness delta zone of influence, and the material property or the viscoelastic property inside this zone is different from the original one because of the presence of the grid. So the original time function or relaxation function is denoted by E of t, and the altered or a new time function is denoted by E Zoi of t. And if you plot the two, it is assumed that the grid has a beneficial effect, and it lifts up the function E Zoi compared to the original function E of t. The difference is seen across the entire time range, but it is quantified here as the ratio between E infinity and E infinity Zoi. So the ratio between these two is defined as kappa, and if kappa is equal to 1, then their two time functions are identical and the grid has no effect. And if kappa is greater than unity, then there is a beneficial effect from the grid. As you can see, the effect is most pronounced at long times. This is equivalent also to slow moving loads or to high temperatures, considering the time temperature superposition applies. So in the PhD project of Julius Nielsen, we built an instrumented section where there was a grid placed between the bottom asphalt lift and the top of the granular base. And this is one example, a strain in the y direction, which is the direction transverse to the travel of this forklift that we used for loading the section. And here you can see the measured strain, the dotted line here. And here you can see the attempt to model the response without including an asphalt grid reinforcement in the calculation. And here a better match to the measured strain was a model that included an asphalt grid reinforcement effect. And in our experiment, we found that kappa was around 2 in this case. The objective of this work was to develop a lab procedure for quantifying kappa, so we don't need to build full-scale sections and instrument them and compare models. And the idea was also to demonstrate a procedure on one type of asphalt with one type of a grid. And here's the approach. So if you have a uniaxial specimen, here is a cross-sectional view of a uniaxial asphalt concrete specimen that is loaded from the top by some stress history, and the virgin material has a relaxation function E of t. Then if we are placing a grid in the middle of the specimen, there is some effect as before, where the relaxation function is different than the virgin function. The zone of influence here is applied over either from the grid towards the top or from the grid towards the bottom. And the overall zone that is influenced is at a thickness of 2 times delta. Now, normally we have LVDTs with a certain gauge length that span the specimen for characterization. Here is one such an LVDT. The scheme shows that the gauge length is larger than the zone of influence, and it is currently placed in the middle height of the specimen. So if we can define some parameter alpha 1 that is corresponding to LVDT1, which is the zone that the gauge length spans that is influenced by the grid. So here we have 2 times delta zone of influence divided by the gauge length. Now, since the specimen is no longer uniform or homogeneous, because we have two materials actually reacting to sigma applied. When we use the readings from LVDT1, we will get a different relaxation function that will be a linear combination of the relaxation function of the virgin material and the relaxation function of the material within the zone of influence. And since alpha was defined here, we can use alpha in this expression. So alpha times E Zoe plus 1 minus alpha 1 times E of t, that will be the relaxation function that will be measured from LVDT1. Now, if we have another LVDT, same gauge length, LVDT2, and this LVDT is attached to the specimen from the middle towards the bottom, we have a different alpha, alpha 2, and this time alpha 2 is only half of alpha 1, because only part of the or half of the zone of influence is being captured. And if we were to use LVDT2 to calculate the material properties, here we will see that we will get another result, which would be a different relaxation function, E2 of t. And this relaxation function will be a linear combination between the material properties or the viscoelastic property outside the zone of influence and inside the zone of influence, but this time alpha 2 is the factor. Now, the ratio between these two can be expressed as shown here. The ratio between the two is a function of E1 and E2, but also alpha 1 and alpha 2. And kappa is the limit as t goes to infinity of this ratio. Now, since E1 and E2 can be measured using the readings from LVDT2 and LVDT1, and alpha 1 and alpha 2 are known because they are linked with the geometry of the LVDT and also some estimation of how big is the zone of influence, then we are in a position to estimate kappa in the laboratory. Thank you very much.